Welcome, Wake Forest parents and families. We are here today to share our presentation just for parents and families, part one, what to do before school starts. I'm Betsy Chapman. I'm the Executive Director of Family Communications, and part of my job is to help you learn more about Wake Forest and to feel as engaged as you possibly can through our website, through our communications, and through the Daily Deke blog, which I author. And I'm so pleased to have with me Dr. James Raper, who I will let introduce himself.
Thanks, Betsy. My name is James, as Betsy said. I am currently the Assistant Vice President for Health and Wellbeing at Wake Forest in the Division of Campus Life. Prior to the last few years of being in that role, I served a variety of roles in the University Counseling Center, including being its director for 5 years. I've been at Wake for the last 20. So we've spent a lot of time, Betsy and I, with parents in supporting both parents and families and their students through the journey of being college students. So what should you be doing right now to help your children get ready for college? This Just for Parents program actually has been going on for over 30 years. I've been a part of it for the last 10, and I dragooned Betsy into doing it last year as a partner. It's been incredibly popular. And I say all that to say that one of the things we've talked about for the last few years is breaking it into two pieces, as opposed to the presentation being only during the orientation time and arrival time. What about some of the stuff that would be really helpful to talk to parents about during the summer? And so that's what this is. We're finally doing it. So while this may be old hat for some parents, we thought it might be useful to hide the ways that high school and college differ. And this is, as I said, this is important so parents and students know what to talk about this summer and how to best prepare for that important transition. So part of prepping for college is getting into the right mindset, both for family members and students. Parents are often the ones most sensitive about the cost of college, but college is your students' experience. They're going to need to live it on their own more and more. I expect I'm not alone in thinking about what I would do differently if I could go back to college. And for me, it would be going actually going and attending my 8 a.m. class, which was poli-sci, and I've gotten into politics now, and I wish I had actually read the Federalist Papers and all the other things I didn't do that I should have. But again, this is your student's journey. So part of the conversation that I hope you have with your kids and that all of us will be having over the next few years is how can we help them benefit from our experiences while also allowing them to have the critical growth experiences that Wake Forest provides. So it would be helpful now to have some discussions about what your student wants to get out of college and what you're hoping for. Those might well differ, and being on the same page and clearly communicating is a crucial part of the successful college experience for the entire family. So let's take a moment to look at where most families are in the K-12 journey and what looks different in college.
And James and I are both parents of rising high school juniors, I guess.
Yes.
And so this college thing is becoming not just professional in terms of what we do every day and every year at Wake, but it's also getting pretty personal. So we will be in your shoes in a very short time.
Mildly terrifying, personal.
I know,
mildly terrifying.
Absolutely horrible. But what you may remember throughout your time as a parent or family member of a K through 12 student is that families are encouraged really to be involved. You typically probably had a lot of communication with your students' high school, a lot of high touch access to grades. You might have had a parent portal that you can get on to look at their schedules. You could have had parent teacher conferences, and probably the message that you heard either overtly or subtly is that parental involvement leads to student success. And from a developmental standpoint, it's really important and appropriate for K through 12 families to have sort of a director or a manager role in helping their students get through high school. But the dynamic shifts when your student starts college, and so does the expected level of familial involvement. So let's talk for a moment about what this looks like at the college level. So the college model, as you can see here, the circles in our Venn diagram shift. And I want to be really careful to stress that parents and families are no less important. You are still the key source of love and support for your students. But what we find in college is we want to have a different kind of involvement for families. You will have fewer communications in college than you probably did in high school, although we do pride ourselves on trying to be very communicative with our families and letting you be as engaged as you want to be. But at the college level, we really want and need students to be making their own decisions. And that's part of how they grow. So we're really encouraging families to move to more of a consultant role. I think about my own high school junior, and I know in my heart that if I keep telling him what to do and helping decide his path and directing him, he's not going to grow. So as our students leave high school and come into college, we need them to try things and make mistakes. Mistakes are okay. This is how we learn. I mentioned communications a minute ago. You'll notice that Wake Forest in many cases is primarily communicating with your student and not you. We have other communications that are just for families, but we're trying to nudge students into being responsible for reading all their emails, taking care of all their details. And I want to show you some examples of what this looks like in the real world. So I mentioned that we typically communicate with students, and this is not just a Wake Forest thing, this is a most colleges thing, on certain areas because your students have certain privacy rights that are afforded to them for healthcare and HIPAA. So if your student is over 18, your student's healthcare at Wake Forest is as private as yours is with your own primary care physician. Students can typically sign a waiver at each visit to the student health service so that they can allow a doctor or a nurse to talk about their condition, but they don't have to. One of the things that sometimes we hear from families is, I need to find a blanket healthcare power of attorney to have my student sign so that I can have access to everything. And while the motivation is totally understandable, and again, I'm a mom myself, if there was something serious that happened to my son, I would absolutely want to know. There's a difference between your student thinking that you have access to every single healthcare decision they make. For example, if I were in college when I was at Wake, I might have been perfectly happy for my parents to talk to the student health service if I had the flu, but not if I needed a pregnancy test, for example. So we don't want students to be in a position where they don't seek help because they're afraid of what's happening. Wake has a robust set of notification processes for very serious situations. So I feel very confident you would be notified if they needed to contact you. Similarly with grades, students are covered under a federal Family Educational Right to Privacy Act that says unless they waive that right, their grades and their class schedule and stuff is not things we can share. So you can talk to your student about, is that something they wish to share, and come to a family decision on what makes sense. James's area of the world is mental health. Mental health is confidential with a couple of very rare exceptions. And also tuition bills. Those are going to go to your student because they're the one that is in school. I strongly, strongly urge you to talk to your student about authorizing you as a third-party payer, because we want to make sure that you don't miss a tuition bill. And if they haven't checked their email, we don't want them to not register on time. So that's a really key thing. But just understanding that those are privacy related things, not a Wake Forest is sort of trying to be mean things, but talk to your students about what's important to you to know. So one of the things that you can do right now in the weeks between now and move-in is allow or continue to allow your student to be more and more independent. This is a moment to step back, to offer less advice. They need to be building some of those competencies of how to figure out how to get things done. That could be something as trivial as, if they have a doctor's appointment, put them in charge of saying, what time do you need to leave here so you can make it on time? And they have to think about how much traffic will there be? Will there be stoplights? All of those things. But it's a moment to let them really practice doing things in a safe place. And the desire here is you as grown people know how to run your lives. You have had practice to do all of the minutia of life and how to manage yourself, but your students are just learning that. And so more and more that they can practice those things before college starts, and certainly after it starts, the better prepared they will be. So a few things to get into the habit of now. I like to sort of think about this as the Teflon Don. Let the questions and things bounce off you and back off onto your students. So if you have questions about things, or your student has questions about things, charge your student with doing that research, looking it up on the web, contacting the office. Every time your student has a chance to have an interaction with an office or a department at Wake, they get closer and closer to developing a relationship with those offices. And it also really helps build their skill sets of things they'll need to do as an adult. You know, how do I cold call an office to ask a question? How do I fix an administrative issue? They will have to be their own managers in terms of deadlines once college starts. So while we give you access to lots of different deadlines that they have this summer, let them be the ones to have those deadlines and be charged with remembering them. And understand that they will make some mistakes. And as a parent, for me, it's really hard to see when I think my son's about to do something that I know is probably not the right thing to do. But it's important to start letting them try their own things, test their own logic out, because they need some of the trial and error of decisions and consequences, certainly not on giant things, but on some of the smaller things, and help them make mistakes, and they'll or allow them to make mistakes and allow them to learn from those things. So to the degree that you can get in the habit of these things now, it will position your student better for success when they get to campus in August.
So every family will have its own expectations for student behavior. It's certainly important to discuss those expectations long before college starts. So this is an example of one of the topics that we would talk about in late August when everyone had moved in, and we would often say like, yeah, we wish we could talk to parents about that in advance. So things like alcohol and drug use, and being thoughtful, intentional, and even practicing how you're going to have a conversation around not getting into a car if you're concerned someone's been drinking. These are great things to practice. You want to be very clear with your student about what you will accept, what you will not. And I really find it valuable to frame this conversation around family values, what your individual family, your personal family's values are around particular topics. It also supports developmentally what college students are, as opposed to saying this is what you can and cannot do, because we all know as an 18-year-old, they're gonna go, well, don't tell me what to do. I'm gonna go do the opposite thing. If we bring them in as almost, not exactly, but almost a peer, and say, let's really reflect on what our family's values are. And we've lived those out, imperfectly, but we may have been living those out. You're really reminding them, and then you're engaging in that conversation. It can be a back and forth. You actually want a back and forth. That's how they're gonna learn. That's how they're going to stay connected to you and really hear your message a little bit more clearly than rolling their eyes and going, gee, here I am being lectured at again. Please stress that balance and self-care is critical. I will tell you, there is not a particular test that is going to determine whether or not they end up being successful in life. Whatever success means for you and your family, and again, your family's values. I have many, I think Betsy has too, I'm sure everyone viewing this has as well, many times where I have made massive mistakes, and they did not submarine my life. But when you're at the other end of the telescope, the small end, it might seem like this next decision or this next test or this next paper, or participating in a fraternity or sorority or a club or a team, is sort of make it or break it time, and that is very, very few. There are very few times where that's true. Transition. I talk a lot about this as a mental health provider when I was providing care in the counseling center, and continue to talk to parents and families quite a lot about this. Transition, particularly, or even when there are exciting transitions and positive and we want them, they really can be destabilizing. They're difficult for all of us. If we think about some of the most exciting times in our lives, looking back, even the ones where it's a new house we're very excited about, or a new baby that's being added to the family, or something like that, a new job that we're excited about, they still can be pretty destabilizing and can really affect our sense of organization, our mood. It can take us a while. So it's now think about being an incoming college student, and it's not uncommon for students to feel anxious or sad or depressed. And for the most part, this is transient. So, and talking with friends or family and their RAs is more than adequate for the average college student. For others, particularly for those with a more significant history of mental health concerns, this will be an important time to remind them of the support you provide to them, how much you encourage them to seek out counseling, to seek out other kinds of professional support and guidance that's available at Wake, and certainly in the local community. And our Wake Forest professionals will help our students navigate that. Help your students be open to all the possibilities that college brings. I think one of the mantras that I really like sharing with students, as well as parents and families, is if you've gotten through your time in college and you felt comfortable the whole time, I think they missed something really important. And so I usually say to folks who are feeling really uncomfortable and they've come into the counseling center when I was working there, and I would actually reframe it and say, this means you're doing it right. It doesn't mean there aren't things we can do to help you navigate this with a little bit more ease, but reframing this as learning opportunities and being exposed to difference it's a wonderful piece of college. So they could have a roommate of another race, or religion, or sexual orientation, physical ability, national political affiliation, amongst other kinds of differences. And part of that of being in college is learning from someone different from you, particularly in those intimate experiences of being a roommate or being a hallmate or being in a close group with someone else or others who are different. So we hope that you see that as a gift and you reframe that as a gift for your students if they're having a kind of a questioning reaction to that. So generally preparing for autonomy. It's like the greatest thing ever if you're a college student. I remember just, I had no oversight whatsoever, and that's super exciting. And yet I'll say, sitting in the counselor's chair, students also will eventually feel conflicted about it. They'll be excited in the first maybe few weeks or months, and then a fair amount of them will kind of go, but I kind of wish someone would just tell me what to do, and I could get my laundry done and my meals would be made for me and I don't have to think about it. I still have some of that reaction myself sometimes. So students will have to decide when to eat and how much, if and when to exercise and how much, when is bedtime, when is homework time, what is fun time. Am I going to drink alcohol? And if so, what are my limits? How am I going to express my sexuality, amongst a variety of other considerations and decisions? We encourage you to tell your high-achieving student that even if high school was easy and they didn't have to work that hard, college will likely be different for them. There will be a time they get a B or a C or a D, or if you're me, an F, for the first time. This has been one of the themes you're going to hear from us. Share your own struggles. This is a time to engage with them as the emerging adults that they are, and be transparent about when you struggled. It will help validate and normalize their experiences. It'll also help them feel like they can come to you later. And I know you really want that for when things really are maybe more significant and serious. They need to know you've messed up on something once too, and that you grew from it. Help your students understand that bumps in the road, like finding friends or feeling comfortable in a class or a club, adjusting to a roommate situation, that these are all normal. This is actually part of the college experience. And if you talk about that now, when it's actually happening in the moment in August, September, October, November, or sometime later, they might have an echo of that inside them and realize they're not alone. And loneliness really is part of that transition to college. They've just finished their senior year. It may feel like to them that they just have to start all over again, which certainly takes time and effort. And it's sort of ironic that you can have 14 other classmates and several thousand others who are going to be arriving a few days later, and that it also feels lonely. But important for them to remember, and here's where you can be a really helpful reminder, that almost all their peers are going through something very, very similar, if not in that particular moment, really within the next few weeks.
And James has offered, as expected, wonderful advice and framing, and to kind of bring it home. A lot of what you can do in the next several weeks as you get ready to come to college is to spend some time being deliberate, both in your own thinking about your changing roles and in conversation with your student about how what they had traditionally known in that K through 12 setting in terms of your relationship dynamics change now. It's really helpful to get that shared understanding about sort of where your lane and your students' lanes diverge. The temptation in many families is, because you're invested incredibly much emotionally in your students' college experience, but also financially, of course, is for parents and families to want to kind of jump in and try to smooth out any rough edges or help make some plans. But to the degree that you can sort of back off of those inclinations, and again, I have to fight these in myself all the time as a mom, think about how this sort of consultant role can look. So think about your son or daughter being the one to sort of self-manage, and that looks like things like choosing their classes, deciding on a major, figuring out which campus organizations to join, handling their day-to-day, everything from what time do I get up to when do I need to do laundry, letting them be the ones to develop those relationships with faculty or campus offices when they have questions or need assistance or anything like that. So the temptation to say like, oh, I want to look at the course catalog and help you pick out classes, or oh, I want to look at all the clubs and organizations and make suggestions. If you can sort of let your student direct those, and your job is really to provide that soft landing place, the loving base of support. I know you're going to do a great job picking your classes. I'm excited about your opportunities to get involved. You can be a sounding board, but instead of directing what they need to do, you need to make a list of classes, you need to research major requirements, you need to do this. Prompt them with some questions. So what do you think will be most important to you in terms of how you think about your class selection? Or what have you thought about in terms of thinking about campus clubs and organizations? So prompt them with some questions. What have you thought about? What has the Wake Forest website said? Who on campus might be able to help you with those situations? So give them a little bump to figure out how to go, but let your student be the one to take that journey. So the more they can have the space to do that, the quicker they'll acclimate to college, and the better they'll be able to find their way, and also find their self-confidence when they know they can do things because I've had a chance to do them. One thing I would say is you can help your students a lot by thinking deliberately about the language you use when you're talking about college, whether that's to your friends or other family members. So if you say something like, oh, we're trying to figure out which classes to register for, or we have a question about the residence hall and we want to talk to somebody on campus, as subtle as it seems when you use that we language, it can feel to your student like they think you are an equal actor in that process. And if your student thinks you've got this, they might not feel as invested to try to find out the answers or do things themselves. So the more, you can direct that language to you need to find out the answer to this question. You need to look at this. It will really signal to your student that you trust them and that they've got this, which is really important to them.
I'd add one little piece to that if I can, Betsy, and that is the more a student can feel a sense of ownership over their decisions, the outcome they can then own as well. Their successes feel better, are more, they can champion them more, and the real times they've tripped and fallen, they can take responsibility for them. They know this was mine. I made this choice and it was mine. I'm going to learn from that. And your job is to remind them they can learn from that. But I think that sense of ownership over successes and failures is really important.
100%.
So transitioning to this role of consultant that Betsy has mentioned, easy to say, very hard to do. The more practice you get now through the summer, the more likely when the rubber meets the road, if you will, that you and your student will have a successful transition, and you'll be able to do it because you're going to want to swoop in and rescue. I mean, it's a natural thing you've been doing for the last 18 to 20 years. Is you've been responsible. Like, you get in trouble if you don't take care of your kids, and then we have Betsy and James saying like, well, let's take a step back and be a consultant. It's really hard to do. And it's really okay also to reach out and ask me or Betsy or anybody in a lot of the support offices at Wake Forest. We have those reminder conversations. And sometimes it's a 2-minute conversation, sometimes it's a little bit longer. And what you'll hear us say is, so is there a way you can prompt your child to ask some questions of the university as opposed to you deciding for them or you finding the answers for them? And that's all it takes. And you go, oh, right, I remember this now. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. So give them space to figure it out. And comforting encouragement often does just what kind of gives them just what they need.
And James, if I could break in on one thing, I will say right now, sometimes when parents and families contact us and they have legitimate questions, understandable questions, and we push back and say, have your student contact us with that. Have your student, set up a meeting with me, right, so we can talk about that. Our goal there is not to be unhelpful for you. Our goal is to give your students a new opportunity to grow a new or different skill, or to practice getting to know somebody they don't know. So while it might be frustrating because I know the answer and I could give it to you, keep in the back of your mind that our goal is always to figure out how can we help your student grow the most, even if that might take a little extra work on their part.
It's really highlights when you talk to someone who works with college students in universities, it's why we do this. We love helping students grow, and it's such a rich environment to do that. What we're gonna mention in a minute is the second part of our presentation later this summer at orientation is all about partly about the safety net. It's not just like help them grow and throw them out the nest. It's like we have a really rich safety net here at Wake as well, but this is the stuff to focus on in the summer. So what we all want for now to begin closing up, both families, parents, and colleges, specifically Wake certainly, is the success of your students. Broadly defined success, academically, personally, intrapersonally, interpersonally, to be the global leaders that Wake Forest produces. There are ways that you can parent your children that will make their college success more likely, and ways that can unintentionally hinder their progress and delay that a little bit. So hopefully what we've talked about will give you some points to ponder as you get ready for move-in, get some extra hugs in, some extra family dinners in over the next few months. And as I mentioned, we'll have a session later in the very end of the summer where we'll talk a little bit more about what to expect from this first year. And I'll let Betsy have the final word.
Oh, I love having the last word. Thank you, James. So thank you for hanging with us today. One of the virtues of doing this online and recording it is that unlike the first night of move-in when you're sweaty and tired and have hearts full of emotion and exhaustion and all the things that you feel, is being able to look at this in advance gives you some time to think about these issues, to initiate conversations with your students, and also to introduce myself and James as well as other support offices as resources for you. So you have a few more weeks before move-in to think about anything that we've said today that sparks your interest or your curiosity. You may have additional questions. Our email address is up on the screen. It's parents@wfu.edu. Send any questions to us. We also have on our parents and families website, which is just parents.wfu.edu, we have a who to contact for button. So if you need particular information about the Learning Assistance Center or about advising or something else, that will show you which offices are responsible for those. I would encourage you, to the degree that you can, to let your students be the one to ask those questions or contact those offices. Because again, the more they can get to know our campus departments and begin forming relationships, the easier their time at Wake will be. So as we think about the last few weeks before move-in, we wish you a wonderful rest of your summer. We are here ready to help you and your students have the best possible college experience. James referenced the fact that we'll have a second portion of this that'll be recorded closer to move-in and available to you. But for now, be in touch with us if you need us. And we can't wait to have you and your students on campus in August. Thanks, y'all.